an aspect of Oblivion that I feel like there could be an interesting amount of detail that we are missing from our Let's Play are the books. As a rule of thumb, I don't spend a long time going through the books or reading the books during the Let's Play, simply because there aren't that many of them, and remembering which ones we have read and gone into would prove to be an issue. This was also the case during the Morrowind Let's Play. Even though the few books I did read I found interesting, we never actually dived deeply into all the books. So, I thought, let's do a companion piece for the Oblivion Let's Play. My name's Billy, and this is that piece. We are going to go through all of the books available in Oblivion, read them, and talk about them for a little bit. I think it would be interesting to see what they have in them. It would be interesting to flesh out the world a little bit and see what we can piece together from them. So join me on the first book we're going to read. The first book is called Book 3 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. Volume 3 of a historical series about Vivek and the Empire. I'm reading this off my phone, so it might have a slightly different format than the in-game one, but I choose to have the pretty camera work and setting as a priority for the video. 15th First Seed, 2920, Caer Suvio, Cyrodiil. From their vantage point high up in the hills, the Emperor Remen III could still see the spires of the imperial city, but knew he was far away from the hearth and home. Lord Glavius had a luxurious villa, but it was not close to being large enough to house the entire army within its walls. Tents lined the hillside and soldiers were flocking to enjoy his lordship's famous hot springs. Little wonder, winter chill still hung in the air. Prince Juliek, your son is not feeling well. When Potentate Versidius Shea spoke, the Emperor jumped. How the Akavir could slither across the grass without making a sound was a mystery to him. Akavir is something, this is now away from the book, but I know from the name, but the name alone. I'm fairly sure that that's what the blades are named after, the actual weapons, so it'll be interesting to see if there is some connection there. Back to the book. Poisoned, I'd wager, grumbled Remen. See if he gets a healer. I told him to hire a taster, but like I have, but the boy's headstrong. There are spies all around us, I know it. I believe you're right, your Imperial Majesty, said Versidiu Shea. These are treacherous times and we must take precautions to see that Morrowind does not win this war, either on the field or by more insidious means. That is why I would suggest that you not lead the vanguard into battle. I know you would want to, as your illustrious ancestor Remen I, Brazolus Dor and Remen II did, but I fear it would be foolhardy. I hope you do not mind me speaking frankly like this. No, nodded Remen. I think you're right. Who would lead the vanguard then? I would say Prince Juliek. We'll go Juliek. If he were feeling better, replied Akavir. Failing that, Storig of Farron, with Queen Nagia of Riverhold at the left flank and War Chief Ulach of Limoth at the right flank. A Khajiit at the left flank and an Ogonian at the right, frowned the Emperor. I never do trust beast folk. Interesting. The potentate took no offence. He knew that beast folk referred to the natives of Tamriel, not the Tieski of the Akavir like himself. I quite agree with your Imperial Majesty, but you must agree that they hate the Dummer. Ulach has a particular grudge after all the slave raids of his land by Duke of Mournhold. The Emperor conceded it was so, and the potentate retired. It was surprising, thought Remen, but for the first time the potentate seemed trustworthy. He was a good man to have on his side. So this is setting up a previous war in the world by the looks of things. And that is the first day of... Who wrote this? Caer Suvio. It's interesting because it's not from the perspective of the writer, yet it has detailed conversations in it, so it's almost meant to be like a chronicle, but it doesn't quite flesh out that way. 18th First Seed, 2920. So what was the first date? 15th. So 3 days on. Ald Everard, Morrowind. How far is the Imperial army? Asked Vivek. Now we know Vivek is deeply ingrained in the lore of Morrowind. I'll say that simply for now. He basically becomes a godlike figure, I believe. 2 days march, replied his lieutenant. If we march all night tonight, we can get higher around at the Priya tomorrow morning. Intelligence tells us the Emperor will be commanding the rear, Storig of Farron has the vanguard, Nagia of Riverhold the left flank, and Ulakth of Limoth on the right flank. Ulakth, whispered Vivek, an idea forming. Is this intelligence reliable? Who brought it to us? A Breton spy in the Imperial army, said the lieutenant, and gestured towards a young, sandy-haired man who stepped forward and bowed to Vivek. What is your name, and why is Breton working for us against the Cyrodiils? Asked Vivek, smiling. My name is Kassir Whitley of Dwynwen, said the man, and I am working for you because not everyone can say he has spied for a god, and I understand it would be, well, profitable. Vivek laughed. It will be, if your information is accurate. So Vivek is a god at this stage in the story, and he's also happy to use... He always seemed like an untrustworthy type in Morrowind, to be fair. 19th First Seed, 2920, Bodrum's Morrowind. The quiet hamlet of Bodrum looked down on the meandering river, the Praye. Pronunciation of words that don't exist in the real world, always troublesome. It was an idyllic site, lightly wooded, where the water took the bend around a steep bluff to the east with a gorgeous wildflower meadow to the west. The strange flora of Morrowind met the strange flora of Cyrodiil on the border and commingled gloriously. There will be time to sleep when you're finished. The soldiers had been hearing that all morning. It was not enough that they had been marching all night, now they were chopping down trees on the bluff and damming the river so its water spilled over. Most of them have reached the point where they were too tired to complain about being tired. Let me be certain I understand, my lord, said Vivek's lieutenant. We take the bluff so we can fire arrows and spells down on them from above. That's why we need all of the trees cleared out. Damming the river floods the plain below so they'll be trudging through mud, which should hamper their movement. That's exactly half of it, said Vivek approvingly. He grabbed a nearby soldier who was hauling off trees. Wait, I need you to break off the straightest, strongest branches of the tree and whittle them into spears. If you recruit 100 or so others, it won't take you more than a few hours to make all we need. So he's really directing this battle, closely. The soldier wearily did as he was bade. The men and women got to work, fashioning spears from the trees. If you don't mind me asking, said the lieutenant, the soldiers don't need any more weapons. They're too tired to hold the ones they've got. The spears aren't for holding, said Vivek and whispered. If we tired them out today, they'll get a good night's sleep tonight, before he got to work supervising their work. So work supervising their work. I would probably not have the double up on words there. It was essential that they be sharp, of course, but equally important that they be well balanced and tapered proportionally. The perfect point for stability was a pyramid, not the conical point of some lances and spears. He had the men hurl the spears they had completed to test their strength, sharpness and balance, forcing them to begin on a new one if they broke. Gradually, out of sheer exhaustion from doing it wrong, the men learned how to create the perfect wooden spears. Once they were through, he showed them how they were to be arranged and where. That night there was no drunken pre-battle carousing and no nervous neophytes stayed up worrying about the battle to come. As soon as the sun sank beneath the wooded hills, the camp was at rest, but for the sentries. Yeah, I find the way this text is written quite interesting. It has such a direct accounting of what's happening and such a direct conversation between characters, yet no one could actually write all this down. The reason that's interesting is because it's written like either a diary or a chronicle, which are actual texts that people used to sort of tell history. So it's obviously there to flesh out the history of the world, but it doesn't quite achieve that because of the style it's written in my opinion. 20th, the First Seed, 2920, Bodrum, Morrowind. Miramor was exhausted. For the last 6 days he had gambled and whored all night long, then marched all day. He was looking forward to battle, but even more than that, he was looking forward to some rest afterwards. He was in the Emperor's command at the rear flank, which was good because it seemed unlikely that he would be killed. On the other hand, it meant travelling over the mud and waste a head left in their wake. I'm guessing this might just be a story, actually. I wonder if it's just fiction. If the author, because it reads a lot more like fiction. If you read anything like Game of Thrones or something like that, the way it goes between the characters and fleshes out a whole area through it, it was just more the dating of it that made me lead to think it was a chronicle of some such. He was in the Emperor's command at the rear flank, which was good because it seemed unlikely that he would be killed. On the other hand, it meant travelling over the mud and waste the army had left in their wake. As they began the trek through the wildflower field, Miramor and all the soldiers around him sank ankle deep in cold mud. It was an effort to keep even moving. Far, far up ahead, he could see the vanguard of the army, led by Lord Sturrig, emerging from the shadow at the base of the bluff. And that was when it all happened. An army of Dunmer appeared above the bluff like rising Daedra, pouring fire and floods of arrows down on the vanguard. Simultaneously, a company of men bearing the flag of the Duke of Mournhold galloped around the shore, disappearing along the shallow river's edge where it dipped to a timbered glen to the east. War Chief Ulach, nearby on the right flank, let out a bellow of revenge at the sight and gave chase. Queen Nagia sent her flank towards the embankment to the west to intercept the army on the bluff. The Emperor couldn't think of nothing to do. His troops were too bogged down to move forward and quickly join the battle. He ordered them to face east towards the timber in case Mournhold's company was trying to circle around them through the woods. They never came out, but many men facing west missed the battle entirely. Miramor kept his eyes on the bluff. Etuldummer, he supposed, must have been Vivek, gave a signal, and the battle mages cast their spells at something to the west. From what transpired, Miramor deduced that it was a dam. A great torrent of water spilled out, washing Nagia's left flank into the remains of the vanguard, and the two together down the river to the east. This is reminiscent, I believe it's the Dutch at some point countered heavy invaders. I can't remember which era it's in, but by opening all the dams and flooding their lowlands, and basically, I think it was a Spanish army, if I remember rightly, basically just completely stopped them. So, pulling from history there. The Emperor paused as if waiting for his vanquished army to return, and then called a retreat. Miramor hid in the rushes until they had passed by and then waded as quietly as he could to the bluff. The Morrowind army was retiring as well, back to their camp. He could hear them celebrating above him as he padded along the shore. To the east he saw the Imperial army. They had washed into a net of spears strung across the river. Nagia's right flank on Sturrig's vanguard on Ulek's Loads of people died. Let me try that one more again. They had been washed into a net of spears strung across the river. Nagia's left flank on Sturrig's vanguard, on Ulak's right flank, bodies of hundreds of soldiers strung together like beads. Miramor took whatever valuables he could carry from the corpses and then ran down the river. He had to go many miles before the water was clear again, unpolluted by blood. 9 days later, I think it is, 29th of the first seed, 2920. You have a letter from the Imperial City, said the chief priestess, handing the parchment to Corda. All the young priestesses smiled and made faces of astonishment, but the truth was that Corda's sister, Rieja, wrote very often, at least once a month. Corda took the letter to the garden and read it, her favourite place, an oasis in the monochromatic sand-coloured world of the conservatorium. The letter itself was nothing unusual, filled with court gossip, the latest fashions which were tending to wine dark velvet and reporting of the Emperor's ever-growing paranoia. You are so lucky to be away from this, wrote Rieja. The Emperor is convinced that his latest battlefield fiasco is all a result of spies in the palace. He has even taken to questioning me. Rutger, keep it so that you never have a life as interesting as mine. Corda listened to the sounds of the desert and prayed to Rutger the exact opposite wish. The year is continued in Rain's hand. There we go. That's our first story. So it's trying to set up a history and a history of conflict between Cyrodiil and Morrowind, one that's very key in the Morrowind game. It doesn't seem as key in this. You only have the vestiges of Empire in this, never an actual dealing with them, although that does seem to come up again in Skyrim. The actual writing style of it is very sort of direct. It's not particularly flowery, and I think it's odd by the way it's written. Volume 3 of a historical series about Vivek and the Empire. So it is meant to be historical, but it reads a lot more like historical fiction than it does actual history. When you read actual history, you rarely get like long conversations between people. You're much more likely to get snippets of quotes and such, because just actually recording voices was less common in real history, and I can imagine not many of the Argonians had microphones. That being said, I think it sets up a part of the world that's very key and a part of the world that doesn't seem to be a part of this particular story. Having characters such as Vivek is definitely something to pull on. It's always going to be like, oh, I know him. I played the game with him in. So it's nice to see his return, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of other stories about him because he is one of the key characters. Anything else of an interest with it? I'm just sort of scrolling through again to see if there's anything I would point at as being interesting. I'd be interested to see the rest of the story. It's setting up these characters, and I wonder if it's going to be a repeat of these characters. But I wouldn't say the story does too much other than what we've talked about. It doesn't like give you loads of depth. It just gives you the brushstrokes of some of the major points of Oblivion and Morrowind. That's going to be all for today. Let me know if you've enjoyed this little weird side project. I know recently I talked about it going down to 2 videos a week, but these are easy to record, so this might be roughly once a week. We'll wait and see. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more of this type of content and also my Let's Play of Oblivion. There'll be also another big project coming up soon, but we'll get around to it. My name's been Billy. Goodbye.